The Goldhurst Foundation Gala was the biggest charity event in New York City. Everyone who was anyone would be there. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gold decorations. Women wore gowns that cost more than most people made in a year. Men strutted around in custom tuxedos, showing off their wealth like peacocks. Cameron Darcy stood on his private mezzanine, looking down at the crowd below. At 32, he was one of the richest men in America. He had inherited billions from his family's business empire. Everyone knew his name. Everyone feared his sharp tongue and cold heart. "Look at them all," Cameron said to his assistant Marcus, who stood beside him, pretending to care about charity while they count the tax write-offs in their heads. Marcus nodded nervously. He had worked for Cameron for 5 years. He knew better than to disagree with his boss. Cameron took a sip of his champagne. It was the most expensive bottle in the hotel. Everything in Cameron's life was the most expensive. He demanded perfection in everything around him. His suits were made in Italy, his cars were custom built. His penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park. But Cameron was alone. He had never been married. He had never been in love. Women threw themselves at him because of his money, but he saw right through them. He trusted no one. He loved no one. And that was exactly how he liked it. "Sir, the speeches are about to begin," Marcus said quietly. Cameron waved his hand dismissively. "I'll speak when I'm ready. Let them wait." Down in the ballroom, Amara Bell felt completely out of place. She wore a navy blue dress that she had bought at a thrift store for $15. She had spent hours altering it to make it fit properly. The dress was simple but elegant. It brought out the color of her dark eyes and complemented her olive-skinned. Amara was 27 years old and worked part-time at the public library. She also cleaned offices at night to make ends meet. She lived in a small apartment in Queens with her younger sister, Sophia. Sophia worked for the catering company that was serving the gala tonight. She had begged Amara to come with her. "Please, Amara," Sophia had said, "I need moral support. These rich people make me nervous. Besides, you never go anywhere fun." Amara hadn't wanted to come. She felt uncomfortable around wealthy people. But Sophia was her only family, and she couldn't say no to her. Now Amara stood near the back of the ballroom trying to stay invisible. She watched the wealthy guests laugh and drink expensive wine. Their jewelry could probably feed a homeless shelter for months. "Can you believe this place?" Sophia whispered, appearing at Amara's side with a tray of appetizers. "I saw a woman complaining because her caviar wasn't cold enough." Amara smiled at her sister. Sophia was 24 and full of life. She had dreams of becoming an actress. She was beautiful and talented, but she was also naive about how cruel the world could be. "Just do your job and stay out of trouble," Amara warned gently. Sophia rolled her eyes. "You worry too much, sis. Live a little." A man in a tuxedo approached them. He was drunk and leering at Sophia. "Hey, beautiful," he slurred. "How about you bring me another drink?" "I'll get that for you right away, sir," Sophia said politely, but the man grabbed her arm. "How about you bring it to my room later?" Amara stepped forward immediately. "Let go of my sister." The man looked at Amara and laughed. "And who are you supposed to be, the fashion police?" Other people started to notice the commotion. Amara felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she didn't back down. "I said, let go of her." The man released Sophia's arm and stumbled away, muttering under his breath. "Are you okay?" Amara asked her sister. Sophia nodded, but she looked shaken. "Thanks, Amara. You always protect me." That's when Amara noticed the silence. She looked around and realized that many people were staring at her. She felt exposed and uncomfortable under their gaze. Up on the mezzanine, Cameron had been watching the entire scene. He studied Amara with cold interest. Her dress was obviously second-hand. Her shoes were old but polished. She didn't belong here, and it showed. "Who is that woman?" Cameron asked Marcus. Marcus squinted down at the ballroom. "I'm not sure, sir. She's not on the guest list." Cameron's eyes narrowed. He hated crashers. He hated people who tried to sneak into his world without earning their place. And most of all, he hated the way this woman carried herself with dignity, despite her obvious poverty. "She's probably some gold digger looking for a rich husband," Cameron said loudly, making sure his voice carried across the mezzanine. Several people turned to look at him. Cameron enjoyed having an audience for his cruelty. He leaned over the quay railing and called down to the ballroom. His voice was clear and cutting. "Excuse me, miss," Cameron called out. "The one in the dress that looks like it crawled out of a 90s sitcom and died at a thrift store." The entire ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned to look at Amara. She felt her face burn with shame, but she stood perfectly still. Cameron continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is a private charity event for invited guests only. I think you might be lost." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some people covered their mouths to hide their amusement. Others whispered to each other behind their hands. Amara looked up at Cameron. Their eyes met across the distance. She saw the cruelty in his face, the satisfaction he took in humiliating her. But she didn't cry. She didn't run. She didn't even look away. Instead, she held his gaze steadily. Her chin lifted slightly. Her shoulders straightened. In that moment, she looked more dignified than anyone else in the room. "You're right," Amara said, her voice clear and calm. "I don't belong here." She turned to Sophia, who was mortified by the scene. "Come on, let's go." "But my job?" Sophia started to say. "Your job isn't worth this," Amara said firmly. The sisters walked through the crowd toward the exit. People stepped aside to let them pass. Some looked ashamed of what they had witnessed. Others continued to smirk and whisper. As Amara reached the ballroom doors, she turned back one more time. She looked directly at Cameron, still standing on his mezzanine like a king looking down at his subjects. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she walked out, her head held high. Cameron watched her go. He expected to feel satisfied. He had put the intruder in her place. He had protected his exclusive world from someone who didn't belong. But instead, he felt something strange, something uncomfortable, something that might have been shame if Cameron Darcy were capable of feeling shame. The crowd slowly returned to their conversations and drinks. Marcus cleared his throat nervously. "Shall I have security make sure she doesn't return, sir?" Cameron didn't answer. He was still staring at the doors where Amara had disappeared. "Sir?" Marcus repeated. "What? Oh. Yes. Fine. Whatever," Cameron said absently. But for the rest of the evening, Cameron couldn't focus on anything else. He gave his speech about the foundation, writing a check for $1 million to thunderous applause. He smiled and shook hands with important people. He played his part perfectly, but in his mind he kept seeing those dark eyes, the way she had looked at him without fear, the dignity in her voice when she thanked him for showing her who he was. No one had ever looked at Cameron like that before. Most people either feared him or wanted something from him. This woman had done neither. She had simply seen him clearly and found him wanting. It bothered him more than it should have. Later that night, Cameron sat in his penthouse apartment, staring out at the city lights. He had changed out of his tuxedo into silk pajamas and a robe. He poured himself a glass of 20-year-old scotch and tried to forget about the woman in the thrift store dress, but he couldn't. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. The way she had protected her sister, the way she had stood up to the drunk man without hesitation, the way she had taken his insult with such grace. Most people would have crumbled under his attack. They would have cried or begged or tried to defend themselves. She had done none of those things. She had simply acknowledged the truth and left with her dignity intact. Cameron had met presidents and kings. He had negotiated with the most powerful people in the world, but he had never met anyone who had affected him the way this stranger. Had he told himself it was just curiosity? He was intrigued by her unusual reaction to his cruelty. That was all. But deep down, in a part of his heart that had been locked away for years, Cameron knew it was something more. The next morning, Cameron couldn't concentrate on work. He sat in his corner office on the 50th floor of the Darcy building, staring at financial reports without seeing them. "Sir, you have the Patterson meeting in 10 minutes, Marcus reminded him. Cameron nodded absently. The Patterson meeting was worth $50 million. It should have been the most important thing on his mind. Instead, he was thinking about a woman whose name he didn't even know. "Marcus," Cameron said suddenly, "I want you to find out everything you can about that woman from last night." Marcus looked confused. Which woman, sir? The one in the blue dress, the one who was with the caterer. Of course, sir. May I ask why? Cameron stood up and walked to the window. From here, he could see most of Manhattan spread out below him. He owned pieces of many of the buildings he could see. He controlled the lives of thousands of people, but he couldn't control the way one woman's eyes had made him feel. I want to know who she is, Cameron said. I want to know everything about her. Marcus made a note on his tablet. I'll have a full report by tomorrow morning, sir. Cameron nodded. Good. And Marcus? Be discreet. Always, sir. The Patterson. Meeting went badly. Cameron's mind kept wandering. He made a mistake in the negotiations that cost his company $5 million. His lawyers would have to work overtime to fix the damage, but Cameron didn't care about the money. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. What he cared about was understanding why a woman he had never met before was occupying every corner of his thoughts. That evening, Cameron had dinner at his private club. The food was excellent, as always. The wine was perfect, the service was flawless, but Cameron tasted none of it. He sat alone at his usual table, picking at his meal and thinking about dark eyes and quiet dignity. Cameron, darling. The voice belonged to Victoria Ashworth, a socialite who had been trying to catch Cameron's attention for years. She was beautiful, wealthy and connected to all the right families. She was exactly the kind of woman Cameron was supposed to marry. Victoria, Cameron said politely, standing as she approached his table. I was hoping I'd see you here, she said, settling into the chair across from him without being invited. I wanted to thank you for that wonderful speech last night. $1 million to the foundation, how generous. Cameron sat back down. It's a tax write-off. Victoria laughed as if he had made a brilliant joke. You're so modest. Everyone was. Talking about your speech. Were they? Cameron asked. I thought they were talking about something else. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Oh, you mean that unfortunate incident with the woman who crashed the party? How embarrassing for her. I felt so sorry for her. Cameron studied Victoria's face. She didn't look sorry. She looked pleased that someone else had been humiliated, did you? Cameron asked quietly. Of course, it must have been mortifying to be called out like that in front of everyone. Though I have to say you handled it perfectly. We can't have just anyone wandering into our events. Cameron felt a surge of disgust. Not at Victoria, but at himself. He realized that he was seeing himself through Amara's eyes. The cruelty, the casual destruction of someone's dignity for entertainment. Excuse me, Cameron said, standing abruptly. I need to go. Victoria looked confused. But you haven't finished your dinner. Would you like me to come with you? No, Cameron said firmly. I need to be alone. He left the club without another word, leaving Victoria sitting alone at the table. Outside on the street, Cameron walked aimlessly through the city. He had a driver waiting for him, but he didn't want to go home. He didn't want to sit in his empty penthouse and think about what kind of man he had become. He found himself in Queens, though he couldn't remember deciding to go there. The neighborhoods here were different from Manhattan. Smaller buildings, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Cameron had always looked down on this kind of life. He had been raised to believe that wealth and power were the only things that mattered. His father had taught him that showing weakness or emotion was a sign of failure. But now, walking through these quiet streets, Cameron wondered if he had been wrong about everything. He stopped in front of a small apartment building. The windows glowed with warm light. He could see families eating dinner together, children doing homework at kitchen tables, couples watching television on old couches. It looked peaceful. It looked real. Cameron had never had any of those things. His childhood had been spent in boarding schools and country clubs. His parents had been too busy with their own lives to pay much attention to him. He had learned early that the only way to get attention was to be the smartest, the strongest, the cruelest. Now he was 32 years old and completely alone. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was Marcus, confirming their meeting tomorrow, morning to discuss the information he had gathered about Amara. Cameron stared at the message for a long time. He could learn everything about her, her full name, her address, her job, her family. He could use that information to approach her again, but what would he say? How could he possibly explain why he had humiliated her? How could he make up for the cruelty he had shown her, and why did he even want to try? Cameron had never apologized to anyone in his life. He had never admitted to being wrong. He had never cared enough about another person's feelings to feel guilty about hurting them, but something about Amara Bell had changed everything. He didn't know her name yet, but he already knew she was going to change his life forever. Standing, alone on a street corner in Queens, surrounded by the lives of ordinary people he had always dismissed, Cameron Darcy began to understand that he might not be the man he thought he was, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't know what to do next. The next morning arrived grey and cold. Cameron sat in his office waiting for Marcus to arrive with the information about Amara. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Marcus knocked on the door and entered with a thick folder. "I have the information you requested, sir," Marcus said, setting the folder on Cameron's desk. Cameron stared at the folder but didn't open it. "Her name is Amara Bell," Marcus began. "She's 27 years old. She works part-time at the Queen's Public Library and cleans offices at night. She lives with her younger sister, Sophia, who was working for the catering company last night." Cameron nodded, absorbing each detail. "She has a bachelor's degree in English literature from Queen's College. She graduated with honors but had to give up her plans for graduate school when her parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. She became her sister's guardian." Cameron's chest tightened. She had sacrificed her own dreams to take care of her sister. "There's more, sir," Marcus continued, looking uncomfortable, "about her family background." "Go on," Cameron said quietly. "Her father was Roberto Bell. He was a fashion designer who had a small but successful business about 15 years ago. He designed clothes for several high-end boutiques." Cameron frowned. The name sounded familiar. He had a contract to design a collection for Ashworth and Company. It would have made his career, but the deal fell through under suspicious circumstances. Roberto Bell accused Ashworth of stealing his designs and using them without permission or payment. Cameron's blood ran cold. Ashworth and Company was one of his family's businesses. His father had been CEO at the time. "The lawsuit was settled out of court," Marcus continued. "Roberto Bell received a small payment, but he was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He was also blacklisted from the industry. His business failed within 2 years." Cameron felt sick. His father had destroyed Amara's father's life over some clothing designs. "Roberto Bell never recovered financially," Marcus said. "He took odd jobs to support his family. He and his wife died in the car accident while driving home from his night shift at a warehouse." Cameron closed his eyes. No wonder Amara had looked at him with such disdain. She probably knew exactly who he was and what his family had done to hers. "Is there anything else, sir?" Marcus asked. Cameron shook his head. "That's enough. Thank you, Marcus. You can go." After Marcus left, Cameron sat alone in his office staring at the folder. Inside were photographs of Amara at work, at home, walking down the street. There were copies of her school records, her employment history, her father's legal documents. It was everything about her life, gathered without her knowledge or permission. Cameron felt like a stalker, like a predator, like exactly the kind of man his father had raised him to be. He picked up the folder and walked to the window. 50 floors below, the city bustled with activity. Millions of people living their lives, trying to be happy, trying to survive. Cameron opened the window and held the folder outside. Then he let it go. The papers scattered in the wind, floating, down toward the street like confetti. Someone's entire life, reduced to documents and photographs disappearing into the city. Cameron closed the window and sat back down at his desk. He didn't need to know more about Amara Bell from a private investigator's report. If he wanted to know her, he would have to earn that right. But first, he had to figure out how to become the kind of man who deserved to know someone like her. And Cameron had no idea where to start. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, but Cameron couldn't stop thinking about Amara Bell. He had thrown away the private investigator's file, but the information was burned into his memory. Her father's destroyed career, her parents' death, her sacrifice for her sister. His family had ruined her family's life. Cameron sat in his office, staring at a photograph on his desk. It showed him with his brother Michael and Michael's daughter, Emma. The photo was taken last Christmas, before Michael and his wife died in a plane crash 6 months ago. Emma was now Cameron's responsibility. She was 8 years old and had barely spoken since her parents' funeral. Cameron had hired the best nannies money could buy, but nothing seemed to help the grieving child. His assistant Marcus knocked on the door. "Come in," Cameron called. "Sir, I have Emma's school counselor on the phone," Marcus said. "She wants to discuss Emma's progress," Cameron sighed. Emma's progress was non-existent. She sat in class like a ghost. She didn't play with other children. She barely ate. The expensive therapist said she needed time, but Cameron felt helpless watching his niece fade away. "Put her through," Cameron said. The counselor's voice was gentle but concerned. "Mr. Darcy, I'm calling about Emma's reading difficulties. She's fallen behind significantly since the tragedy. I think she might benefit from our special reading program at the Queen's Public Library." Cameron frowned. "The public library? I can hire private tutors, the best in the city. Sometimes children respond better to a less formal environment," the counselor explained. "The librarian who runs the program is wonderful with troubled children. Her name is Amara Bell." Cameron's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "Amara Bell. She volunteers her time running reading circles for children who are struggling. Emma might feel more comfortable there than with a private tutor." Cameron couldn't speak for a moment. The universe seemed to be playing some kind of cruel joke on him. "Mr. Darcy, are you there?" "Yes," Cameron managed. "Yes, I'm here. Tell me more about this program." "It meets twice a week after school. Children sit in a circle and read together. They discuss the stories. It's very informal and welcoming. Miss Bell has helped many students who've experienced trauma." Cameron closed his eyes. Of course Amara worked with children. Of course she helped people heal from pain. She was probably everything good and pure that he had never been. "Would you like me to sign Emma up?" the counselor asked. Cameron knew he should say no. He should hire private tutors and keep Emma away from the public library, away from Amara Bell. But Emma needed help. And if Amara could help her, then Cameron's own discomfort didn't matter. "Yes," he said quietly. "Sign her up." 3 days later, Cameron drove Emma to the Queen's Public Library. She sat in the back seat of his Mercedes, staring out the window with empty eyes. She wore an expensive private school uniform and carried a designer backpack, but she looked lost and alone. "Emma," Cameron said gently, "we're here." The library was smaller than Cameron expected. It was clean but old, with worn furniture and donated books. Children and adults sat at tables reading or working on computers. It felt warm and welcoming in a way that Cameron's world never did. "I don't want to go," Emma whispered. They were the first words she had spoken all day. Cameron's heart broke a little. "I know, sweetheart, but the lady here is supposed to be very nice. She helps children with reading." "I don't like reading anymore," Emma said. Cameron understood. Reading reminded Emma of her mother, who used to read her bedtime stories every night. "Maybe this will be different," Cameron said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. They walked into the library together. Cameron asked the librarian at the front desk about the reading program. "Oh, you must be here for Miss Amara's group," the woman said with a smile. "They meet in the children's section just around the corner." Cameron's palms were sweating as they walked toward the children's section. He didn't know what he would say to Amara when he saw her. How could he explain that he was here? Would she think he was stalking her? They turned the corner, and Cameron saw her immediately. Amara sat on the floor in the center of a circle of children. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She was reading from a picture book, using different voices for each character. The children were laughing and completely absorbed in the story. She looked up as Cameron and Emma approached, and her smile faded immediately. Their eyes met across the small space. Cameron saw recognition in her face, followed quickly by suspicion. "And dislike, Miss Bell," Cameron said, his voice rougher than he intended. Amara stood slowly, still holding the book. The children looked between the adults, sensing tension. "Mr. Darcy, Amara said coolly. "What are you doing here?" "This is my niece, Emma," Cameron said, putting his hand on Emma's shoulder. "Her school counselor said you might be able to help her with reading." Amara looked down at Emma, and her expression softened immediately. She could see the pain in the child's eyes, the same pain she had felt when her own parents died. "Hello, Emma," Amara said gently, crouching down to Emma's level. "I'm Miss Amara. Would you like to join our story circle?" Emma shook her head and pressed closer to Cameron. "That's okay," Amara said. "You can just listen if you want. We're reading about a little mouse who goes on adventures." She gestured to an empty spot in the circle. "Would you like to sit here, right next to Sophia? She's 8 too." Emma looked at the girl named Sophia, who smiled shyly at her. "I'll stay," Emma whispered. Cameron started to leave, but Amara stood and caught his arm. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Wait for me outside." Cameron nodded and left Emma with the group. He could hear Amara's voice resuming the story as he walked away. 20 minutes later, Amara emerged from the children's section. Cameron was sitting on a bench near the entrance. She sat down beside him, leaving space between them. "Why are you really here?" Amara asked directly. Cameron had prepared a dozen different explanations, but sitting next to her, he found himself telling the truth. "Emma is my brother's daughter. He and his wife died in a plane crash 6 months ago. Emma hasn't been the same since. She won't talk, she won't play, she won't read. Her counselor suggested your program." Amara's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Emma loved books before the accident," Cameron continued. "Her mother used to read to her every night. Now she won't touch them. Grief affects children differently," Amara said. "Books can be triggering when they're connected to someone we've lost." Cameron looked at her with surprise. "You sound like you know from experience." "I do," Amara said simply. "I was 12 when my grandmother died. She's the one who taught me to love reading. For a long time afterward, I couldn't open a book without crying." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "How did you get past it?" Cameron asked. "Someone showed me that books could create new memories too, not just remind me of old ones." Cameron nodded. "Will you help her?" Amara studied his face. "I'll help Emma because she needs it. But let's be clear about something, Mr. Darcy. I'm doing this for her, not for you." "I understand. Do you?" Amara's voice hardened. "Because 2 weeks ago, you humiliated me in front of hundreds of people for sport. You made fun of my clothes, my life, everything about me. And now you're sitting here asking me for favors." Cameron felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I know. I was wrong." "Wrong?" Amara's voice rose slightly. "You were cruel. There's a difference." "You're right," Cameron said quietly. "I was cruel and I'm sorry." Amara stared at him for a long moment. "Are you? Or are you just sorry because you need something from me now?" The question hit Cameron like a punch to the chest. He wanted to deny it, to insist that his apology was sincere. But was it? Would he be sitting here apologizing if Emma didn't need Amara's help? "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think I would apologize anyway, but I honestly don't know." Amara seemed surprised by his honesty. "At least you're not lying about it," she said. They could hear children's laughter from the reading circle. Emma's voice rose above the others, asking a question about the story. "She's talking," Cameron said with wonder. "Books have that power," Amara said. "They can make us forget our pain for a little while." Cameron looked at Amara's profile. In the soft library lighting, she looked even more beautiful than she had at the gala. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that drew him. It was something deeper, something he had never encountered before. "Why do you do this?" he asked. "Volunteer your time, I mean." "Because I can," Amara said. "Because I know what it's like, to need help and not be able to afford it." The implication was clear. She was talking about his family's treatment of her father. "Amara," Cameron began. "Don't," she cut him off. "Don't pretend you don't know what your family did to mine." Cameron nodded. "I know, and I'm sorry for that too." "Your apologies don't bring my father back. They don't undo the years he spent working in warehouses instead of designing clothes. They don't erase the shame he felt at not being able to provide." For his family. Each word was like a knife in Cameron's chest. He deserved every bit of her anger. "You're right," he said. "Nothing I say can fix what my father did. But I want you to know that I didn't know about it until a few days ago." "Would it have mattered if you had known?" Amara asked. Cameron considered the question seriously. 2 weeks ago? Probably not. But now? Yes, it would have mattered. What? Changed? Cameron looked at her directly. "You did." Amara stood up abruptly. "I need to get back to the children." Cameron stood too. "Will you let Emma continue with the program?" "Yes," Amara said. "But you don't need to stay. You can drop her off and pick her up." "What if I want to stay?" Amara's eyes flashed. "Why would you want to do that?" Cameron struggled to find the right words. "Because I want to understand who you are. Because I want to learn from you. Because I think you might be the first real person I've ever met. I'm not here for your entertainment, Mr. Darcy. I'm not some charity case you can study to make yourself feel better about being rich." "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Amara challenged. "You live in a world where people exist for your amusement, where you can destroy someone's dignity for laughs and applause. Why should I believe you see me as anything more than that?" Cameron didn't have an answer, because she was right. He had lived exactly that kind of life for 32 years. "Maybe you shouldn't believe me," he said quietly. "Maybe I need to prove it instead." Amara studied his face for a long moment. "Actions speak louder than words, Mr. Darcy. But I'm not holding my breath." She walked back toward the children's section, leaving Cameron standing alone. For the next hour, Cameron sat on the bench and watched Amara work with the children. She was patient and kind. She helped struggling readers without making them feel stupid. She encouraged quiet children to speak up and helped energetic ones focus. With Emma, she was especially gentle. She didn't push or pressure. She simply created a safe space where Emma could begin to heal. By the end of the session, Emma was participating fully. She read a paragraph out loud without being asked. She laughed at the funny parts of the story. She looked like a normal 8-year-old child again. When the session ended, Emma ran to Cameron with more life in her eyes than he had seen in months. "Uncle Cameron, Miss Amara says I can borrow this book to read at home." Cameron looked at the book in Emma's hands. It was a simple chapter book about a girl and her dog. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," he said. Amara approached them. "Emma did very well today. She's a natural reader." "Can I come back on Thursday?" Emma asked. "Of course," Amara said, smiling at the child. Emma hugged Amara impulsively. "Thank you for making reading fun again." Cameron saw tears in Amara's eyes. As she hugged Emma back, "You're very welcome, sweetheart." As they walked to the car, Emma chatted excitedly about the story and the other children. Cameron had never seen such a dramatic change in her mood. "Miss Amara is really nice," Emma said as Cameron buckled her seatbelt. "She's pretty too." "Yes, she is," Cameron agreed. "Do you like her, Uncle Cameron?" The innocent question caught Cameron. "Off guard. Why do you ask that? You looked at her the way Daddy used to look at Mommy, like she was the most important person in the world." Cameron's throat tightened. Had he been that obvious? "Miss Amara is a very special person," he said carefully. "I hope she likes you too," Emma said. "You've been sad since Mommy and Daddy died. Maybe Miss Amara could make you happy again." Cameron started the car without responding, but Emma's words echoed in his mind all the way home. That night, Cameron sat in his penthouse apartment, thinking about the afternoon at the library. He had watched Amara for over an hour, and he had learned more about her character in that time than any private investigator could have told him. She was patient and kind. She was generous with her time and attention. She saw the best in people, especially children. She had turned his broken niece into a laughing, engaged child in just one afternoon, but she also had strength. She didn't let people walk over her. She stood up for what was right. She called out cruelty when she saw it. Cameron had never met anyone like her. He walked to his window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Amara was probably reading or helping her sister with something, or doing one of 100 small acts of kindness that made up her daily life. She lived in a world completely different from his, a world where people mattered more than money, where kindness was more valuable than power, where a person's character was more important than their net worth. Cameron had been raised to dismiss that world as naive and worthless. But seeing Amara in action, he began to wonder if he was the one who had been living in the wrong world all along. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his lawyer. "Cameron, we need to discuss the Patterson deal, the revised contract. Needs your approval." Cameron barely listened as his lawyer explained the details of the $50 million deal. His mind was still at the library, watching Amara read to a circle of children. "Cameron, are you there?" "Yes," Cameron said. "Just handle it however you think is best." "Are you sure? This is a significant contract." Cameron realized he didn't care about the contract. He didn't care about the $50 million. For the first time in his adult life, money seemed unimportant compared to something else. "I'm sure," he said, and hung up the phone. He walked to his home office and sat down at his computer. He began typing an email to Marcus, cancelling all his appointments for the next day. If Emma was going to continue with the reading program, Cameron was going to be there. Not to make Amara uncomfortable, but to understand how she had created such magic with his niece, and maybe, if he was very lucky, to learn how to become the kind of man who deserved to know someone like Amara Bell. Cameron sent the email and went to bed, but he didn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about dark eyes and gentle hands, and the way Amara had looked when Emma hugged her. For the first time in years, Cameron was looking forward to tomorrow, and for the first time in his life, it had nothing to do with money. Cameron kept his word. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he brought Emma to the library and stayed for the entire reading session. He sat in the back, watching Amara work her magic with the children. At first, Amara ignored him completely. She focused on the kids and pretended he wasn't there. But as the weeks passed, Cameron noticed her glancing at him occasionally. Sometimes she looked annoyed, sometimes she looked curious. Emma was thriving. She had made friends with the other children in the group. She laughed freely and asked questions about every story they read. The hollow look in her eyes was gone, replaced by the brightness of a normal 8-year-old. "Uncle Cameron," Emma said one Thursday afternoon as they drove home, "why don't you ever talk to Miss Amara?" Cameron glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean? You just sit there and watch, but you never say hello or anything. That's not very polite." Out of the mouths of babes, Cameron thought. "Miss Amara and we had a disagreement before you started the program." "What kind of disagreement?" Cameron struggled to explain it in terms an 8-year-old would understand. "I said something mean to her, something that hurt her feelings." "Did you apologize?" "I tried to." Emma frowned. "Mommy always said that when someone won't accept your apology, it means you need to do more than just say sorry. You have to show them you're really sorry." Cameron pulled into their driveway and turned to look at his niece. "What do you think I should do?" "Be nice to her," Emma said simply. "Help her with something. Do something that makes her happy." That evening, Cameron sat in his study thinking about Emma's advice. How could he help Amara? What would make her happy? He thought about the library. It was clearly underfunded. The books were old, the computers were outdated, and the children's section needed new furniture. Cameron could write a check and fix all of those problems in a day. But he knew Amara would see that as him trying to buy her forgiveness. She would probably be insulted by the gesture. No, it had to be something more personal, something that showed he understood what mattered to her. The next Tuesday, Cameron arrived at the library early. He found Amara in the children's section setting up for the reading group. "Mr. Darcy," she said coolly, "you're early. Emma isn't here yet." "I know," Cameron said. "I wanted to talk to you." Amara continued arranging the small chairs in a circle. "About what?" "I've been watching you work with these children for 3 weeks. You're incredible with them." "Thank you," Amara said without looking at him. "Emma told me that you volunteer here every day after your regular job at the library." So you work here from 9 to 5, then you go clean offices until midnight, then you come back here every afternoon to run programs for children. When do you sleep?" Amara finally looked at him. "That's none of your business." "You're right," Cameron said, "but I'd like to make you an offer." Amara's eyes narrowed. "What kind of offer?" Let me hire you. Excuse me? Cameron sat down in one of the small chairs, looking awkward but determined. Quit your cleaning job. Work here full-time. I'll match whatever you're making from both jobs combined, plus benefits. Amara stared at him. You want to pay me to work at the library? I want to pay the library to hire you full-time to run children's programs. You could expand what you're doing, help more kids. You wouldn't have to clean offices anymore. Why would you do that? Cameron met her eyes. Because you're changing children's lives every day, and you're exhausting yourself to do it. Because Emma has made more progress in 3 weeks with you than she made in 6 months with expensive therapists. Because what you do matters more than anything I've ever done in my entire life. Amara was quiet for a long moment. I can't accept your money, she said finally. Why not? Because it would make me feel like I'm being bought, like everything I do here would be tainted by your guilt over what happened at that gala. Cameron nodded. I understand, but the offer stands if you change your mind. Children started arriving. For the reading group, Cameron took his usual seat in the back and watched Amara work, but something was different today. She seemed distracted. She kept glancing at him during the session like she was trying to figure him out. After the session ended, Amara approached him. Walk with me, she said. They left Emma playing with her new friends and walked to a quiet corner of the library. Why? Are you really here every week? Amara asked. And don't say it's just for Emma. You could hire a driver to bring her. Cameron leaned against a bookshelf. Honestly, at first it was just for Emma. But now what? Now I think I need this more than she does. Amara frowned. What do you mean? Cameron struggled to find the right words. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, favors. I've never met anyone who genuinely didn't care about my wealth. And you think that's me? I know that's you. You've made it very clear that you want nothing from me. So I'm what, some kind of novelty to you? No, Cameron said firmly. You're the first real person I've ever met. Everyone else in my world is performing all the time, playing a role, but you're exactly who you are and you don't apologize for it. Amara studied his face. You say that like it's a bad thing to be yourself. In my world it is. Showing weakness or emotion or genuine care about anything other than money is seen as failure. That sounds like a terrible way to live. It is, Cameron admitted. I just never realized it until I met you. They walked back toward the children's section in silence. Amara, Cameron said as they reached the group. Would you have dinner with me? She stopped walking. What? Dinner. Just to talk. Nothing more. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Amara looked at Emma, who was showing her book to another child. Because I'm starting to like you and that scares me. Cameron's heart jumped. You like me? I like the man I see when you're watching. Emma read. I like the man who offered to pay for children's programs without wanting credit for it. But I don't know if that man is real, or if you're just playing another role. He's real, Cameron said quietly. I'm still figuring out who he is, but he's real. Amara looked at him for a long moment. One dinner. But I choose the place, Cameron smiled. Deal. The next evening, Cameron waited outside a small diner in Queens. It was nothing like the expensive restaurants he usually frequented. The sign was faded, the parking lot was cracked, and the building looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s, but when Amara arrived, she looked happy. This is my favorite place, she said. I hope you don't mind. Not at all, Cameron lied. He had never eaten in a place like this in his life. Inside, the diner was warm and cozy. The waitress knew Amara by name and asked about Sophia. The menu was simple, the prices were incredibly low, and the food smelled amazing. So this is how normal people eat, Cameron said, looking around. This is how real people eat, Amara corrected. People who work for their money and appreciate good food at honest prices. They ordered hamburgers and milkshakes. Cameron couldn't remember the last time he had eaten a hamburger. Tell me about your life, Amara said. Not the billionaire part. The real part. Cameron thought about the question. I don't know if there is a real part. I've been playing the role of Cameron Darcy for so long, I'm not sure who I am underneath it. What do you remember from before the role? Cameron was quiet for a moment. I remember being 7 years old and wanting to play with other kids. But my father said that was beneath me. I remember wanting a dog, but my mother said pets were messy and inappropriate for our image. That sounds lonely. It was. I spent most of my childhood with tutors and nannies. My parents were always traveling or working or attending social functions. I learned early that the only way to get their attention was to excel at everything. The food arrived, and Cameron took a bite of his hamburger. It was delicious. "This is really good," he said with surprise. Amara laughed. "You sound shocked." "I am a little. I've been eating at 5-star restaurants my whole life. I forgot that good food doesn't have to cost a fortune. Most of the best things in life are free," Amara said. "Or close to it." "Like what?" "Like watching children discover they love reading. Like helping someone who's hurting. Like sitting in a diner with someone and having a real conversation." Cameron nodded. "I'm beginning to understand that." They talked for 2 hours. Cameron told Amara about his loneliness, his struggles with Emma, his growing doubts about his lifestyle. Amara told him about her dreams of becoming a teacher, her worry about Sophia's acting ambitions, her love of books and children. "Can I ask you something?" Cameron said as they finished their meal. "Sure. Why did you agree to have dinner with me after everything that's happened?" Amara was quiet for a moment. "Because I see the way you look at Emma. The love in your eyes when she laughs, the fear when you think about losing her. That's real. That's not an act. And because my father always said that people can change if they want to badly enough. I think you want to change." Cameron reached across the table and touched her hand gently. She didn't pull away. "I do want to change," he said. "I want to become the kind of man who deserves to know you." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Cameron, I know I have a long way to go. I know I've lived my whole life as someone you have. Every reason to hate. But being around you, seeing how you live, watching how you treat people, it's shown me what I could be." "Change is hard," Amara said softly, "especially when your whole world is built around who you used to be." "Then help me," Cameron said. "Teach me how to be better." Amara looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen there before: vulnerability, hope, love. "Okay," she whispered, "but you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't change, just for me. Do it for yourself. Do it because it's right. Because if you only change for me, you'll resent me eventually." Cameron squeezed her hand. "I promise." As they left the diner, Cameron felt like a different person than the man who had walked in 2 hours earlier. He was still wealthy. He still had power and influence. But for the first time in his life, those things felt less important than the woman walking beside him. Over the next few weeks, Cameron began making changes in his life. Small ones at first. He started eating lunch in the company cafeteria instead of his private dining room. He learned the names of his employees. He stopped making cruel comments about people. His business associates noticed the changes and didn't like them. "What's gotten into you, Cameron?" asked Richard Patterson, his biggest client. "You used to be ruthless. Now you're asking about my employees' families." Cameron shrugged. "Maybe I'm growing up, but the biggest change was in how he spent his time. Instead of attending society parties and networking events, Cameron spent his evenings at the library with Amara and Emma. He helped children with their reading. He listened to their stories, he learned their names, and asked about their lives. Amara watched these changes with growing amazement. "You're different," she told him one evening as they walked Emma to the car. "Different how?" "Softer, kinder, more real." Cameron stopped walking. "Is that a good thing?" Amara smiled. "It's a wonderful thing. Good enough for you to kiss me?" Amara's cheeks flushed. "Cameron, I've been wanting to ask you that for weeks. We're taking this slow, remember? I know, but I had to ask." Amara stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek softly. "That's all you get for now." Cameron touched his cheek where her lips had been. "It's perfect." But even as Cameron fell deeper in love with Amara, trouble was brewing in his business world. His brother Alexander had been watching Cameron's behavior with growing concern. "He's lost his edge," Alexander told their father during a private meeting. "He's making decisions based on emotion instead of profit. It's going to cost us millions." Their father, Richard Darcy, was not pleased. He had built the family empire through ruthless business practices and expected his sons to do the same. Find out what's causing this change, Richard ordered, and fix it. Alexander hired a private investigator to follow Cameron. Within a week, he had photographs of Cameron at the library, at the diner with Amara, walking through Queens like a normal person. She's the problem, Alexander reported to his father. Some nobody he met at a charity event. She's making him soft. Richard studied the photographs with cold eyes. Then we remove the problem. What do you mean? Find something we can use against her. Everyone has secrets, everyone has weaknesses. Find hers and use it to make her disappear from Cameron's life. Alexander smiled. This was the kind of family business he understood. But Cameron was oblivious to the danger gathering around the woman he was falling in love with. He was too busy discovering what it felt like to be happy. For the first time in his life, Darcy was living instead of just existing. And he had Amara Bell to thank for it. He just didn't know that his family was about to try to destroy her for it. Alexander Darcy sat in his father's office, spreading photographs across the mahogany desk. The pictures showed Cameron and Amara at the library, at the diner walking through Queens together. Her name is Amara Bell, Alexander said. She's nobody special, works at a library, cleans offices at night, lives in a cheap apartment in Queens with her sister. Richard Darcy studied the photos with cold eyes. There has to be more. Cameron wouldn't risk everything for some nobody. Actually, there is more, Alexander said with a cruel smile. Remember Roberto Bell, the designer who sued us 15 years ago? Richard's expression hardened. What about him? Amara Bell is his daughter. The room fell silent. Richard leaned back in his chair, processing this information. She knows, he said finally. She knows what we did to her father. And she's using that knowledge to manipulate Cameron, Alexander added. She's probably planning to expose the whole story, ruin our reputation, maybe even sue us again. Richard stood and walked to the window. Below, the city spread out like a chessboard. He had been playing this game for 40 years and he always won. We need to remove her from the equation, he said. How? Richard turned back to his son. The same way we removed her father. We destroy her credibility, make her look like a gold digger who's using a family tragedy to manipulate Cameron. And if that doesn't work? Richard's smile was ice cold. Then we make her an offer she can't refuse, money to disappear from Cameron's life forever. What if she says no? Everyone has a price, Alexander. Everyone. Meanwhile, Cameron was completely unaware of his family's plotting. He spent his days thinking about Amara and his evenings at the library with her and Emma. Emma was like a different child now. She laughed easily, made friends quickly, and had started writing her own stories. The reading program had given her back her love of books and her joy in life. Uncle Cameron, Emma said one Thursday evening as they drove home from the library, are you going to marry Miss Amara? Cameron nearly drove off the road. What makes you ask that? You look at her the way Prince Eric looks at Ariel in The Little Mermaid? All googly-eyed and happy, Cameron laughed. Googly-eyed? You know what I mean. Do you love her? Cameron thought about the question. Did he love Amara? He thought about her constantly. She made him want to be a better person. When he was with her, he felt complete in a way he had never felt before. Yes, he said quietly. I think I do. Does she love you back? I don't know. I hope so. Emma nodded seriously. I think she does. She gets all smiley when you're around. That evening, Cameron called Amara. Hi, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Hi yourself, what are you doing? Reading lesson plans for tomorrow. Sophia's at an audition. What about you? Sitting in my empty apartment thinking about you. There was a pause. Cameron, I know we're taking things slow, but I need you to know something. What? Cameron took a deep breath. I love you, Amara. The silence stretched so long that Cameron wondered if she had hung up. Amara, are you there? I'm here, she whispered. I love you too. Cameron's heart soared. Really? Really? I tried not to. I told myself it was too complicated, too risky, but I can't help it. Can I see you tonight? It's late. Please, I need to see you. An hour later, Cameron knocked on Amara's apartment door. She opened it wearing jeans and one of his sweaters that she had borrowed weeks ago. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood looking at each other for a moment. Then Cameron stepped forward and kissed her gently. It was their first real kiss, and it was perfect, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Cameron murmured against her lips. "What took you so long?" Amara teased. They sat on her small couch, talking and kissing until late into the night. Cameron had never felt so happy or so complete. "I have something to tell you," Amara said as Cameron prepared to leave. "What?" Sophia got a call back for a Broadway show. "A small part, but it's her big break. She's so excited." Cameron smiled. "That's wonderful. You must be proud." "I am, but I'm also scared. What if she gets hurt? What if the business is too cruel for her?" Cameron took her hands. "Then she'll have you to help her through it, just like you helped Emma." "I hope so." Cameron kissed her goodnight and drove home with a light heart. He was in love, and the woman he loved felt the same way about him. Life was perfect, but perfection never lasts long. The next morning, Cameron arrived at his office to find his father and brother waiting for him. "We need to talk," Richard said. Cameron sat down behind his desk. "About what?" Alexander threw the photographs on the desk. "About this." Cameron looked at the pictures of him and Amara. His blood ran cold. "You've been having me followed?" "We're concerned about you," Richard said smoothly. "You've been acting strangely, making poor business decisions. We needed to understand why." "My personal life is none of your business. Everything you do affects this family and this company," Richard snapped. "And this woman is a threat to both." "Amara isn't a threat to anyone." Alexander laughed harshly. "Really? Do you know who she is, Cameron? Do you know why she's really with you?" "What are you talking about?" "Her father was Roberto Bell," Richard said, "the designer we dealt with 15 years ago." Cameron felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "I know about her father." "Do you? Do you know that she's probably planning to use you to get revenge for what happened to him?" "That's not true, isn't it?" Alexander leaned forward. "Think about it, Cameron. A nobody from Queens suddenly shows up in your life right after you humiliate her publicly. She forgives you too easily? She's playing the long game." "You're wrong," Cameron said, but doubt crept into his voice. "Are we? Has she ever asked you for money? For help with anything?" Cameron thought about all the times he had offered to help Amara financially, and she had refused. "Actually, no, she's turned down every offer I've made." Richard and Alexander exchanged a look. "She's smarter than we thought," Richard said. "She knows that obvious gold digging wouldn't work on you, so she's playing hard to get, making you chase her." "That's not what's happening." "Prove it," Alexander challenged. "Offer her something she can't refuse. $1 million to walk away from you. If she really loves you, she'll say no." Cameron stood up angrily. "I'm not going to bribe the woman I love to prove she loves me back." "Then you're a fool," Richard said coldly. "And this family doesn't tolerate fools." "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard's smile was cruel. "It means you have a choice to make, Cameron. Your family and your inheritance, or this woman." "You can't be serious. Dead serious. If you continue this relationship, you'll be cut off completely. No money, no company shares, no family support. You'll be just another nobody from Queens." Cameron stared at his father and brother. He had always known they were ruthless in business, but he had never imagined they would turn that ruthlessness on him. "You can't do this." "We can and we will," Richard said. "The board will vote you out of the company. Your trust fund will be frozen. Your penthouse apartment belongs to the company, so you'll be evicted. Everything you have comes from this family, Cameron. Walk away from us, and you walk away from everything." Cameron felt the walls closing in around him. He thought about his life without his wealth and power. No penthouse, no expensive cars, no private jets, no safety net. But then he thought about Amara, about the way she looked at him with love in her eyes, about Emma laughing as she read her stories, about the simple happiness he had found at that small library in Queens. "I need time to think," he said. "You have 24 hours," Richard said. After that, we handled the situation ourselves. What does that mean? Alexander smiled coldly. It means we make Miss Bell an offer she can't refuse, and if she's as noble as you think she is, she'll take our money and disappear to protect you from losing everything. Don't you dare threaten her. It's not a threat, Cameron, it's a promise. After his father and brother left, Cameron sat alone in his office, staring out at the city. Everything he had ever known was at stake. His entire identity was built around his wealth and power. But was that really who he wanted to be? He thought about the man he had become over the past few months, the man who helped children with their reading, the man who ate hamburgers in diners and walked through Queens holding hands with a librarian. That man was happier than Cameron Darcy had ever been. His phone rang. It was Amara. "Hi," she said brightly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." "Amara," Cameron said, and his voice broke. "What's wrong? You sound upset." Cameron wanted to tell her everything, about his father's ultimatum, about the choice he had to make, about the threat hanging over her head, but he couldn't. Not yet. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just a bad day at work." "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not right now, but thank you." "Okay, I'll see you tonight at the library." "Of course. I love you, Cameron." "I love you too," he said, and meant it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. That evening at the library, Cameron watched Amara work with the children and knew what his choice had to be. He couldn't live without her. He couldn't go back to being the cold, cruel man he had been before he met her. Even if it meant losing everything else, he had to choose love. After the reading session, Cameron took Amara for a walk around the neighborhood. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "What is it?" Cameron told her everything. About his father's ultimatum, about the threat to cut him off, about Alexander's plan to offer her money to disappear. Amara listened in silence, her face growing pale. "So you see," Cameron finished, "I have to choose between my family's money and you." "And what choice are you going to make?" Amara asked quietly. Cameron stopped walking and took her hands. "I choose you," he said. "I choose love over money. I choose happiness over power. I choose a real life with you over a fake life with them." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "Cameron, you can't. You don't understand what you're giving up." "Yes, I do. I'm giving up everything that doesn't matter to get the one thing that does." "But what will you do? How will you live?" Cameron smiled. "I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll get a job at the library. Maybe I'll teach children to read. Maybe I'll start over completely." "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious, but I need to know something." "What? Will you start over with me? Will you build a new life with me, even if I have nothing to offer you but love?" Amara threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with all the love in her heart. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." The next morning, Cameron walked into his father's office and placed his resignation letter on the desk. "I choose Amara," he said simply. Richard's face turned red with rage. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "No," Cameron said. "The biggest mistake of my life was waiting 32 years to become the man I was meant to be." He walked out of the Darcy building for the last time, feeling lighter with every step. Within a week, Cameron was completely cut off from his family's money. He moved out of his penthouse and into a small apartment in Queens, just a few blocks from Amara. It was the happiest week of his life, but Richard and Alexander weren't finished with their revenge. 2 weeks later, Amara came home from work to find Sophia sitting at their kitchen table, crying. "What's wrong?" Amara asked, rushing to her sister's side. "I lost the Broadway job," Sophia sobbed. "They said someone told them I was unreliable, that I came from a bad family." Amara's heart sank. She knew immediately who was responsible. "There's more," Sophia continued. "I got fired from the catering company too. They said the same thing." Amara held her sister as she cried. The Darcy family was destroying Sophia's dreams to get back at Cameron. That evening, Amara called Cameron and told him what had happened. "I'm so sorry," Cameron said. "This is my fault. It's not your fault, it's theirs. I have to stop this. I can't let them hurt you and Sophia." "How?" Cameron was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I'll figure something out." The next morning, Cameron went to see his father one last time. "Stop hurting them," he demanded. Richard smiled coldly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Sophia's job, the Broadway show. I know you're behind it. Prove it. I'm warning you. Leave them alone." "Or what? You'll what, Cameron? You have no power anymore, no influence, no money. You're nothing." Cameron stared at his father with disgust. "You're right, I have no power in your world, but I don't want power in your world anymore." He turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped him. "She'll leave you, you know. When the novelty wears off, when she realizes what she's giving up to be with a nobody, she'll leave you for someone who can actually provide for her." Cameron looked back at his father. "You're wrong. But even if you weren't, I'd rather have one day of real love than a lifetime of everything else." A month passed. Cameron found work at a small non-profit organization that helped inner-city children with literacy programs. The pay was terrible, but the work was meaningful. He and Amara grew closer every day. They had dinner together every night, usually in her small apartment. They took long walks through Queens, talking about books and dreams and the future. Sophia slowly recovered from losing her jobs. With Amara's encouragement, she started auditioning again. Cameron used what few connections he had left to help her, but he was careful not to let his family know. Life wasn't easy, but it was real. It was honest. It was full of love. One evening, as Cameron and Amara sat on her couch reading together, there was a knock at the door. Amara opened it to find a delivery man holding a large package. "Amara Bell?" he asked. "Yes, this is for you." Amara took the package, puzzled. She wasn't expecting anything. "Who's it from?" Cameron asked. Amara looked at the return address. There wasn't one. She opened the package carefully. Inside was a dress, but not just any dress. It was identical to one her father had designed years ago, the one he had shown her in his sketches, but had never been able to produce because his business had been destroyed. The dress was made from the finest silk, with intricate beadwork and perfect tailoring. It was exactly as her father had envisioned. Amara's hands shook as she lifted the dress from the box. A label was sewn inside the neckline. "A. Bell, revived," she read aloud. A card fell from the folds of the dress. Amara picked it up with trembling fingers. "I destroyed what was yours once. I hope this can be the beginning of giving it back." There was no signature, but Amara knew who had sent it. She looked up at Cameron with tears in her eyes. "Did you do this?" Cameron stared at the dress in amazement. "No, I had nothing to do with this." "Then who?" Before Cameron could answer, there was another knock at the door. Amara opened it to find Cameron's father standing in the hallway. But he looked different. Older, tired, almost humbled. "Mr. Darcy," Amara said in shock. Richard looked at his son, then at Amara. "May I come in?" Cameron stood up, moving protectively toward Amara. "What do you want?" "To apologize," Richard said quietly. "To both of you." "I don't believe you," Cameron said. Richard nodded. "I don't blame you, but I'm telling the truth." He looked at Amara. "I sent the dress. I had it made from your father's original designs." "How did you get his designs?" Richard's face showed genuine shame. "Because I kept them. After we stole them from him, I kept the original sketches. I told myself it was for legal protection, but really, I think I kept them because I knew what we had done was wrong." Amara stared at him in disbelief. "You've had my father's designs all these years?" "Yes, all of them. Every sketch, every note, every measurement. I want to give them back to you." "Why?" Cameron demanded. "What's your angle?" Richard looked at his son with sad eyes. "No angle. I'm dying, Cameron." The room fell silent. "What?" Cameron whispered. "Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months." Cameron sank back onto the couch, stunned. "I know I've been a terrible father," Richard continued, "and a terrible person. I've hurt people for money and power, and I justified it by telling myself it was just business." He looked at Amara again. "What I did to your father was wrong. It destroyed his life and his family. I can't undo that damage, but I can try to make amends." Amara was still holding the dress, tears streaming down her face. "There's more, Richard." said. He pulled out a thick folder. Your father designed an entire collection, 23 pieces. I want you to have everything. I don't understand, Amara said. I'm also prepared to fund the production of his designs, to help you start the fashion line he never got to build. Cameron stood up again. What's the catch? No. Catch? Consider it my final gift to both of you. Both of us? Richard looked at his son with love and regret. I was wrong to make you choose between family and love. I was wrong about everything. You became a better man when you walked away from our money. You became the man I should have raised you to be. Cameron felt tears in his own eyes now. I don't expect forgiveness, Richard continued, from either of you. I just wanted to do one thing right before I die. He handed the folder to Amara. Your father was a brilliant designer. The world should see his work. Amara took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of sketches in her father's handwriting. Designs she had never seen before, dreams he had never been able to fulfill. Thank you, she whispered. Richard nodded. I'll have my lawyers contact you about the funding. No strings attached. It's yours to do with as you please. He turned to Cameron. Son, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you find it in your heart to forgive a foolish old man? Cameron looked at his father, really looked at him. For the first time in years, he saw not the ruthless businessman, but a tired, sick old man who was trying to make peace with his mistakes. I forgive you, Dad, Cameron said quietly. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. After Richard left, Cameron and Amara sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the remnants of the evening's revelations. I can't believe this is real, Amara said, still holding her father's sketches. It's real, Cameron said. You're going to fulfill your father's dreams. We're going to fulfill them, Amara corrected. Together. Cameron kissed her gently. Together. 6 months later, Cameron stood in the back of a crowded fashion show in downtown Manhattan. On the runway, models wore the designs of Roberto Bell, finally brought to life by his daughter Amara. The show was a triumph. Fashion critics called it a revelation and a masterclass in timeless elegance. Orders poured in from boutiques around the world. But Cameron wasn't watching the fashion show. He was watching Amara, who stood at the side of the runway with tears of joy streaming down her face. In the audience, he could see Sophia, who had landed a role in an off-Broadway show and was slowly building her acting career. He could see Emma, now 9 years old, and a voracious reader who helped other children at the library. And in the front row, in a wheelchair but smiling proudly, was Richard Darcy. The cancer was winning, but he had lived long enough to see his son truly happy. After the show, Cameron found Amara backstage, surrounded by congratulating friends and reporters. Excuse me, he said, pushing through the crowd. I need to borrow the designer for a moment. He pulled Amara aside into a quiet corner. How do you feel? He asked. Like my father is watching from heaven and smiling, she said. He is, Cameron said, and he's proud of you. I couldn't have done this without you. Cameron shook his head. You could have done anything, Amara Bell. You just needed someone to believe in you. The same way you needed someone to believe in the good man you could become. Cameron pulled her into his arms. I love you. I love you too. As they kissed, surrounded by the chaos of backstage celebration, Cameron thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible night at the charity gala to this moment of triumph, he had lost his fortune, but gained something infinitely more valuable. He had found love, purpose, and most importantly, himself. Cameron, Amara said, pulling back from their kiss. Yes? I have something to tell you. What? Amara smiled, her eyes sparkling with mischief and love. I think it's time you met my sister's boyfriend. He's been asking when he can meet the man who stole my heart. Sophia has a boyfriend? She does. And he's been wanting to meet the family. Cameron grinned. Family. I like the sound of that. A year later, Cameron stood in the same library where he had first watched Amara work with children. But today was different. Today, the library was decorated with flowers and filled with their friends and family. Emma, now 10, stood at the front of the room holding a small book. She was the flower girl, and she took her job very seriously. Sophia sat in the front row next to her new husband, a kind actor who had swept her off her feet during the run of their show together. In the back, in his wheelchair, Richard Darcy watched with pride as his son prepared to marry the woman who had saved his soul. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Cameron barely heard the words. He was too busy looking at Amara, who stood before him in a dress her father had designed and she had brought to life. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was his. And he was hers, not because of money or power or family connections, but because they had chosen each other. When it came time for vows, Cameron spoke from his heart. "Amara, you saved me from a life that wasn't worth living. You showed me what love really means. You taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be earned through kindness, loyalty, and grace." He took her hands in his. "I promise to love you, honor you, and choose you every day for the rest of my life. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because a life without you isn't a life at all." There wasn't a dry eye in the library. When Amara spoke her vows, her voice was strong and clear. "Cameron, you could have chosen the easy path. You could have stayed in your world of wealth and power. But you chose love instead. You chose to become the man I fell in love with, not because I asked you to, but because you wanted to be better." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to love you through everything life brings us, rich or poor, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow. You are my heart, my home and my happy ending." "You may kiss the bride," the minister said. Cameron kissed his wife with all the love in his heart, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. Later, at the simple reception in the library's main hall, Cameron sat with Amara, watching their friends and family celebrate. "No regrets?" Amara asked, leaning against his shoulder. Cameron looked around the room. No designer flowers, no expensive champagne, no society photographers, just people who loved them, celebrating their happiness. "Not a single one," he said. Emma ran up to them, still clutching her book. "Uncle Cameron, Aunt Amara, I wrote you a story for your wedding present." She climbed onto Cameron's lap and opened her book. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a mean king who lived in a tall tower. He had lots of money but no friends because he was cruel to everyone he met." Cameron smiled, recognizing himself in the story. "But one day," Emma continued, "the king met a kind librarian who showed him how to be nice. She taught him that being rich in love was better than being rich in money." She turned the page, revealing a drawing of a man and woman holding hands, and they lived happily ever after, helping children learn to read and making the world a better place. Emma looked up at Cameron with bright eyes. "Do you like it?" Cameron hugged her tightly. "It's the best story I've ever heard." As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Cameron and Amara stood together in the quiet library, surrounded by books and memories. "Thank you," Cameron said. "For what?" "For seeing the man I could be instead of the man I was, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for loving me enough to let me change." Amara smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to change, for choosing love over everything else, for showing me that fairy tales can come true." Cameron kissed her forehead gently. "Ready to start our new life, Mrs. Darcy?" "I've been ready since the day I met you," she said. They walked out of the library hand in hand, stepping into their future together. Behind them, the books on the shelves held thousands of stories of love and redemption, but none of them were as beautiful as the real love story that had just begun. Cameron Darcy had started as a cruel billionaire who thought money could buy everything. He had ended as a man who understood that the best things in life, love, family, purpose, happiness, were free. And Amara Bell had started as a woman who cleaned offices and volunteered at the library. She had ended as a successful designer, carrying on her father's legacy. Together they had proven that people can change, that love can conquer greed, and that sometimes the best stories are the ones that start with "once upon a time" and end with "happily ever after," the end.